Hey there, I'm Ayesha Khan, and I grew up Amish in Pennsylvania. I left the community a few years ago, and people are always asking me about what life was really like behind closed doors. Today, I want to talk about something that nobody really discusses: the bedroom rules that governed our lives. Some of these are going to sound absolutely wild to you, but I promise you this was my reality. So, let's get into it. The first rule I need to tell you about is bundling. I know that sounds like a weird word, but just hear me out. When I started dating at 16, this is what happened. A boy would ask me out. We'd spend the evening together, and then he'd come upstairs to my bedroom. Yes, you heard that right. My parents knew about it, everyone knew about it. We'd get into bed together, both of us fully dressed, and we were supposed to just lie there and talk. That was the whole point. Talk about our future, get to know each other, build a connection. But here's the thing. You're lying in bed next to someone you're attracted to in the dark for hours, and you're supposed to resist every single urge. They told us it was about building character and self-control. Honestly, it was one of the most difficult things I ever experienced. My heart would be pounding the entire time, and I'm not going to lie to you. Plenty of couples didn't make it through those nights without crossing lines they weren't supposed to cross. That's just the truth. The second rule is that physical intimacy before marriage was absolutely forbidden. Now, I know a lot of religious groups teach this, but the difference in the Amish community is what happens if you mess up. If you had relations before your wedding, you couldn't just quietly get married and move on. You had to stand up in front of the entire church, and I mean everyone, your parents, your siblings, your grandparents, the neighbors, the whole district, and confess what you'd done out loud with everyone staring at you. I watch friends go through this, and the shame on their faces is something I'll never forget. And if a girl got pregnant, the whole community would race to get them married before it became obvious. They'd speed up the baptism classes, do everything possible to make it happen fast because an unmarried pregnant girl was seen as the ultimate failure. Rule number 3 is something that really stuck with me. Modesty didn't stop when you got married. Even in your own bedroom with your husband, you were expected to stay covered. We wore these long nightgowns that went down to our ankles, long sleeves, high necklines made of plain white or gray cotton. Nothing pretty, nothing that made you feel attractive. The idea of wearing something nice or appealing, even for your own spouse, was considered prideful and wrong. You were supposed to be humble in every aspect of your life, including the most private moments. I remember thinking, even when I'm married, I still can't just be comfortable in my own skin. That really messed with my head. Number 4, and this one surprises people the most, is what your wedding night actually looks like. There's no romantic honeymoon, no hotel room, no getting away together. You get married during the day. There's a big meal with the community. And then that night, you sleep at your parents' house. Your bride's parents' house specifically, your family is right down the hall. And the next morning, you're up at dawn, helping clean up from the wedding, sweeping floors, washing dishes, putting away tables and benches. For the next few months, your version of a honeymoon is traveling around to different relatives' houses every weekend, staying overnight with them, and collecting wedding gifts. So your first experiences as a married couple are happening with your parents in the next room, or your aunt and uncle, or your grandparents. There's no real privacy, no time to just be together and figure things out on your own. Rule 5 is something I heard about from people in stricter communities than mine. Some groups have what they call a waiting period after the wedding, 3 days where the couple is married but not supposed to consummate the marriage. I talked to a woman who went through this, and she told me those were 3 of the longest days of her life. You're finally married, finally allowed to be together, but you're still supposed to wait. The reasoning was that it proved you were marrying for the right reasons, not just because of physical attraction. But think about the pressure that puts on the 4th night. Everything's built up. You've been waiting, and you're supposed to just know what to do. Number 6 really affected me personally, and that's the complete absence of any education about intimacy or our bodies. We learned nothing in school. Our parents never sat us down and explained anything. The entire subject was considered too shameful to discuss. You were expected to figure things out by watching animals on the farm and maybe picking up whispers from other kids your age. I went into my late teens barely understanding how my own body worked. When you finally do get married, you're supposed to just magically know what to do, but nobody prepared you for any of it. The confusion and embarrassment I felt is hard to put into words, and I know I wasn't alone. So many of us struggled because we'd been kept in the dark on purpose. The 7th rule is about what happens when someone breaks the sexual rules in the community. If there's adultery or any kind of inappropriate behavior, it doesn't stay private. The person has to confess in front of the church. The ministers and elders ask you questions, some of them very personal and uncomfortable, and then you stand there while everyone knows your business. The whole point is public accountability and shame. But what it actually created was a culture where people hid things because they were terrified of that humiliation. And when serious things happened, like situations involving abuse or manipulation, victims often stayed quiet because they didn't want to go through that process. The community would handle it internally, the person would confess and be disciplined, and then everyone was expected to forgive and forget. But the hurt didn't just go away. Living with these rules year after year did something to me. There was always this feeling that anything related to your body or natural feelings was something to be ashamed of. You couldn't talk about it, couldn't ask questions, couldn't be open, even with the person you were supposed to spend your life with. Everything was wrapped up in secrecy and guilt. Even normal, healthy things felt wrong because that's what we were taught. Now that I'm out, and I've had time to process everything, I can see how much those rules were about control, keeping us sheltered, keeping us ashamed, keeping us dependent on the community's approval for everything. Walking away meant having to unlearn all of that programming and figure out who I actually was underneath all those layers of rules and expectations. If you grew up in a strict religious environment, you might understand what I'm talking about. That feeling of finally being free, but also feeling lost because the rules were all you knew. It's a process, and some days are harder than others, but I wouldn't go back. I hope this gave you a real look into what life was like for me. A lot of people romanticize the Amish way of life, but there are sides of it that are really difficult, especially for women. Thanks so much for listening to my story. If you want to hear more about my experiences, let me